Connor Murphy took himself from a socially inept nerd to one of the most successful fitness influencers on YouTube.
I'm gonna be talking to some girls, and while I'm talking to them, Jack's gonna rip off my shirt.
Only for his thrill-seeking lifestyle to lead him to do substances that permanently destroyed his mind and made him think that he was God.
What is happening? I've gone literally mentally.
Over the course of 5 years, Connor turned his self-destruction into content. That is, until it landed him in a jail cell in Thailand for beating his girlfriend with a golf club. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, you'll definitely need it, and I hope you enjoy the story of Connor Murphy. Long before he was getting it on with ladyboys on OnlyFans, Connor Murphy wanted to be an inspiration for kids who were outcasts, like he was. On the same day he created his YouTube channel, he uploaded an autobiographical introduction video explaining what got him into fitness in the first place. According to him, he wasn't the most popular kid at school, and people didn't really get along with him.
I was a complete loser in high school and college. But it was way worse than high school. I went to a school called Searcy High School back in Arkansas. And man, I was a social outcast, man. And guys, I was a really shy and introverted kid, all right? So I could not break into any friend group, all right? I was afraid to talk to people. So I really never made any good friends. I was a loner, man. I pretty much just kept to myself throughout all of high school.
This really bothered Connor to the point where he decided to take up doing bodyweight exercises, which eventually evolved into playing soccer, basketball, and golf. More importantly, however, he began lifting weights as soon as he turned 13 and was allowed to start going into the weight room. He stuck to it until he got to 185 pounds at 17 years old, which is no small feat for a guy standing at 5'8". However, according to his own retelling, this ultimately did nothing to solve his social ineptitude.
And I'd actually been training for a few years. I actually had a decent physique, but I was way too shy and humble to even show it off. I seriously wore these baggy polo golf shirts and these nerdy glasses, so I was like the least intimidating, somewhat muscular guy. And because I was way too shy to stand up for myself, I was actually bullied pretty badly in the locker room, you know, before and after sports practice. You know, I couldn't even make friends with like other dudes, let alone talk to girls. There was no way I even thought about having a girlfriend because I couldn't even talk to a girl. I was so shy. I could not even have a conversation with someone.
Due to his inability to relate to his peers, he managed to get himself transferred to an extremely academically challenging board school called the Arkansas School of Mathematics, where he believed he would find like-minded people, basically socially inept nerds with a 4.0 GPA. It was only when he started actually taking classes there that he found himself once again not fitting in. Despite getting a girlfriend for the first time in his life, he still felt like the odd one out, as other kids continued to find him awkward. It's also around this point that he claimed to have plateaued and lost motivation to keep dedicating himself to fitness. Now, usually I do wait a little longer to comment on someone's story, but in Connor's case, it's important that I establish a few things early on. So first off, Connor himself tells the audience that his initial motivation to work out was insecurity. While this is pretty common, it can often lead to delusions, with some people thinking that fitness can solve other problems in their lives, including mental problems, as we'll see later on. What solidifies this omen is that he claims he plateaued at 17 years old. Although this is possible, it's quite unlikely for someone to reach their natural lifting limit that young in life. Immediately after talking about his plateau, he transitions into discussing changing his mindsets and breaking through the plateau, and going from 185 pounds to 205 in a brief period, which, as many specialists in the fitness community have speculated, means it's very likely that the change he went through was taking steroids.
Maybe it wasn't obvious when he actually was on cycle, but now it's pretty obvious when he's off what he can no longer hold on to or achieve with that lack of hormone support in the system. So
given how taboo this topic was during this time, it's not really surprising that he wasn't super open about his steroid use. And while there's nothing wrong with doing that stuff on its own, it does become increasingly evident that Connor's main motivation for fitness continued to be his insecurity. After posting this video to show his gains to people online, he proceeded to hammer out what eventually became his main gimmick, gratuitously exposing his mostly naked body in public to get shock reactions from random bystanders. While he did also occasionally dabble in workout tutorials, it's clear that they were a distant second place to the real meat and potatoes of his content, with him doing artistic pieces as well as social commentary performance art pieces, such as him half naked while hanging from the ceiling at Walmart, or him half naked on the roof of Chipotle, or him half naked on Omegle. I think you're getting the point here. Quickly, his videos ballooned to millions of views, peaking whenever the videos were about wooing girls with his amazing physique. Despite how successful his channel was at the time, he appeared to have a pretty good perspective on his own success. During what was arguably his peak in internet fame, he continued to quietly attend college at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, simultaneously majoring in economics and computational mathematics. As if juggling that and a successful YouTube career wasn't enough, at around the same time, he revealed that he continued to dedicate himself to golfing, going as far as to qualify for the World Long Drive Championship, one of the most prestigious events in the sport where the winner stands to get $250,000. Lastly, he was preparing to compete in his first ever bodybuilding event to qualify for the men's physique division of Mr. Olympia, eventually placing third. By every imaginable metric, Connor was an overachiever, and his YouTube fame didn't seem to get to his head too much. So what went wrong? Well, in order to really answer that question, we have to look at where his online career was headed. For context, part of what sent Connor into the stratosphere is that during this time, fitness content was a lot more rudimentary than it is nowadays. Although there were a few channels putting out tutorial videos and giving workout tips, very few people paired fitness with entertainment. This meant that anyone who had a sense of humor and some charisma, as well as a good physique, had a relatively easy time finding themselves getting millions of views. The first person to trailblaze this genre was Ziz, who, despite his untimely passing, is often cited as one of the main people who made bodybuilding and aesthetics mainstream, so much so that he was referenced multiple times by Connor Murphy himself. However, the aesthetics genre wasn't the only springboard that sent Connor into popularity, as he capitalized on a much seedier online community: prank channels. For those of you who were fortunate enough to not have been on YouTube during this time period, the mid-2010s were plagued by racy and suggestive prank videos for years on end, with a slew of YouTube channels reaching stellar heights by simply basing their content around groping or kissing strangers on the street. While it is kind of surprising that this kind of lowbrow clickbait slop dominated YouTube for so long, it wasn't without its critics. Ever since the early 2010s, H3H3 Productions parodied that kind of content and made fun of the format to wide acclaim from the YouTube community. In fact, over the years, this kind of video became a real staple of H3H3's channel, and pretty much every prank channel they covered soon met their demise, turning into complete laughingstocks. As Connor's unique fitness spin on the prank format hit massive view milestones, with multiple videos of his getting 20 to 30 million views, and even one skyrocketing to well over 60 million, it was only a matter of time until Connor's time came. After reigning supreme in the algorithm for a little over a year, in February 2017, H3H3 dropped his video on him, which now sits at almost 10 million views.
This guy is a showman, and he's a prankster and a magician. He finds any excuse to remove his clothing at the chagrin of all the boyfriends and the joy of all the ladies. Because I got big tits, fuck me.
Within a few days, Connor dropped his version of a response video, but instead of being offended and taking it poorly, he decided to stick to a common trend at the time, which was asking strangers on the street if they'd smash or pass famous YouTubers, and one of the YouTubers he decided to include was H3H3.
But in light of recent events, I decided the third spot had to go to one of my favorite YouTubers of all time, my idol, Ethan Klein from H3H3 Productions. I've honestly been a long-time subscriber. All of his videos are hilarious, including his recent one.
My idol, Connor Murphy.
Not only did he manage to find a way to turn what could potentially be online drama into more content, but he also got dozens of girls to say that Ethan Klein was unattractive and had a small dick, while he said that he found Ethan sexy. Juvenile? Absolutely. But as far as responses to online callouts go, it's far from being the worst, especially since other of H3H3's targets got so mad about being made fun of that they tried to sue him. As people began discussing Connor on the H3H3 subreddit, someone who claimed to have gone to high school with him didn't ask me anything, providing a picture of Connor from their school's yearbook to prove it. This schoolmate of Connor's described him as extremely socially awkward, having a lot of anxiety and acne, being socially stunted, and potentially having a mild form of autism. This same person also said, he was decently smart like the rest of us, but here's something. Connor sacrificed the chance to be what is basically the equivalent of a prefect in cushy boarding schools because he wanted to golf and couldn't show up for a meeting to confirm him. It's worth mentioning right now that this is something of a pattern for Connor, as despite being unusually overqualified and competent, he tends to dedicate his attention to alternative avenues. list. And as we'll find out, he's consistently bad at picking his priorities. Now, in that same month as the H3H3 callout and response, Connor was actually arrested on 6th Street in Austin, Texas. And of course, he was shirtless when it happened. While it's always a bad thing to get arrested, this wasn't as serious of a situation, since 6th Street is known to be somewhat rowdy, since it has multiple bars, and it's located near a major university, meaning it's where college students go to get hammered. Fortunately, nothing really came of this arrest, and it eventually turned out that it was all just a setup for a prank, as he had been pretending to get in a fight with one of his frequent YouTube collaborators, Brandon Carter. Ultimately, this little stunt also proved pretty fruitful, as the resulting video got well over 6 million views. After these issues following the interactions with H3H3, Connor resumed his regular uploads with no problem, without involving himself in any other bouts of online drama. Not only was his main channel's content doing well, but he also had a side channel where he posted extras from the main channel videos, and many of these also got millions upon millions of views. For a moment, it seemed like there was nothing that could stop his momentum. However, from 2017 to 2020, his content grew increasingly suggestive and clickbaity as he collabed with more bona fide prank channels and doubled down on the sexual angle of his videos. Despite him trying his best to clickbait the audience, his popularity slowly but surely shrunk to a shadow of its former self, with the majority of his videos no longer hitting the million view mark, and the format growing increasingly stale. As his returns were diminishing, it got to a point where he had to resort to very explicit packaging in order to maintain any views. The issue with this is, as time went on, a few sort of adpocalypses took place, and past that point, you couldn't really get away with overtly sexualized content without getting your videos demonetized. So even if he was still occasionally getting some nice views, it's unlikely he was making anywhere near as much money as he used to make in his heyday. While he doesn't bring it up again, this probably would have been a good moment to take a step back from online content creation and go back to focusing on his computational math degree or his golfing, since it looks like he had a pretty promising future in both of those areas. However, it seems that at this point, he'd gotten addicted to the content grind, and particularly all of the attention, affirmation, and money he got from it. But unfortunately for him, it looks like all of those were slowly going away, never to come back. This sharp downturn in popularity came to a head in mid-2020 when, after years of trying to grind and spam his way back into relevance, his content prospects suddenly became exceedingly limited due to the pandemic, making it so that doing street interview content was nigh impossible. Suddenly, and with no lead up, Connor uploaded a 9-minute video simply titled Goodbye, and the contents of this video are pretty bizarre to say the least.
Guys, just to let you know, again, I've done this in the last few videos. This is just acting, okay?
What is happening? I've gone literally mentally insane over the past few days. I don't understand. I've hit my mental breaking point. I used to be so happy when I was a kid. The world seemed endless, the world seemed infinite. It was like I could actually be happy. I had dreams, I had aspirations. It was amazing. And I accomplished it all. Look at my life. I fuck 3 fucking girls a day. 3 girls a day. Do you believe that? Yeah, you do. Look at my YouTube channel. I'm popular, I'm famous, and this doesn't come from ego. This is because I'm unhappy. I have nothing that truly matters.
At the time, this was widely taken at face value, and especially since this was within a year of Etika's untimely passing, people were still on high alert for content creators having mental health crises. But there's something more interesting happening here, and perhaps more disturbing, that actually reveals itself within the first few seconds of the video when he premises it with the claim that this is just acting.
Again, I've done this in the last few videos. This is just acting, okay?
It's obvious from the lack of his usual glassy-eyed expression that there's some degree of honesty here and not just acting. But why would Connor say that he's just acting? If you're familiar with the huge pickup artistry community that was nearly symbiotic with the fitness community at one point in time, you've probably heard that one of the most common tricks for gaining confidence is, simply put, pretending. If you lack confidence and being fit, smart, or wealthy isn't doing anything to fix that, the next step is to create someone else in your mind that is. and then mimic what that person would do. Of course, that requires you to suppress any feelings that you're being dishonest. In fact, if anything, you're encouraged to embrace dishonesty, just as long as it gets you closer to your goals. If that sounds mentally dangerous, that's because it is. If you're lucky enough to not end up with something like imposter syndrome, the end result of that practice can, and often does, result in a self-induced dissociative identity disorder. You dislike yourself so badly that you create an alter ego, and after spending enough time as that alter ego, you can no longer distinguish who you really are or what your goals in life are. Based on what Connor is saying here, we can clearly see that this is what happened. He first acknowledges that he was much happier as a person when he was his true self, an insecure, nerdy kid who didn't get along with others. Then, he points to having accomplished everything he wanted as a teenager, and also points out that it brought him no joy. At which point, he proceeds to blame his parents.
My parents have sucked away every ounce of happiness in my body. I've done everything just to please them, just to make them proud, just to make them happy, and it didn't work. I started YouTube so they would be proud of me, so I could be successful and rich. Show them that I could have a fun life, but they don't get it.
Now, it's not at all impossible that his parents contributed to his issues by encouraging him to see his value as conditional on his accomplishments. However, I strongly doubt that either of them told him, "Son, you have to run a shirtless prank YouTube channel in order to be happy." It's much more likely that they advised him to go to college, which he deliberately set aside to focus on his online career. The real issue here, which Connor conveniently sidesteps, isn't that the things he's accomplished are meaningless. The real issue is that the person who accomplished them wasn't actually him, but instead the persona he created. It's not surprising that he can't enjoy the things he has when he knows that most, if not all of them, were ill-gotten through deception. His aversion to his real identity, and honesty in general, is so severe that he has to tell himself he's acting when he's about to show his real emotions for a moment, but he also seems incapable of realizing that he is responsible for his own situation. Worse yet is the fact that instead of taking this mental breakdown as an opportunity to self-reflect and be accountable for his state, he proceeds to lay everything on his parents, even making some pretty shocking claims.
They can't understand happiness, they just don't understand it. I visit them 5 times a year. I offer to fly them out to LA. I do everything for them. Everything I can to make them happy. It's not just me, they ruined my sister. They instilled such horrible unhappiness into her. And then her unhappiness feed it into me. They convinced her that I was the cause of her unhappiness. They convinced her that I bullied her. I just bought them a $1,000 flight for my family for one day on a Saturday just to visit me in Los Angeles. They've never visited me here. For 3 years. 3
According to him, the bullying he mentioned came from somewhere else, not him. However, there's not enough information about this aspect of the story to really comment on it. What is evident, on the other hand, is that Connor talks about visiting them 5 times a year and flying them out to LA as proof that he does everything to make them happy. Again, he's equating happiness with things that don't really have anything to do with being happy. I'm sure most parents would prefer their kid not be an LA slop content prankster than be flown out to LA. But Connor doesn't linger on this topic long enough for that to be addressed. He then claims that he learned about something called the science of happiness from every world religion to try and tell his parents about what true happiness is, but they wouldn't listen to him. Given the context Connor himself provides, it sounds a lot like he's trying to convince them that his lifestyle is good, and much to his dismay, they're not buying it. This is particularly off-putting to him because his parents not approving of his path in life pokes a lot of holes into the charade that he worked for years to build. If they just took him up on the flight he paid for, he'd interpret that as an unspoken approval of his lifestyle. But because they are not, the self-doubt that he completely reinvented himself to escape starts to creep back in. Another sign that Connor is just trying to get people to enable his delusions is that he, in passing, mentions that he's also been trying and failing to convince his friends of his happiness. He then mentions something strange.
I've stayed up all, for 6 days I've stayed up, I haven't slept. I wrote a 70-page book in 2 days to try and explain happiness to them. And it's crazy, but yeah, I'm crazy, but I just want them to be happy. I'm trying to save their lives. I'm afraid they're gonna kill themselves. They don't realize how unhappy they are. know exactly how to do it. To experience true happiness. I figured it out. I realized why the bathtub feels so amazing, because it's trying to tell me something. It's trying to reach out and say, you can be at peace here in the bathtub. You just have to go through a little pain beforehand.
While the book he wrote stays elusive for quite some time after this video went up, his talk about the bathtub is pretty easy to read. Although whether he was seriously considering doing something or not is impossible to know. Regardless of anything else, if what he said is true and he stayed up for 5 or 6 days straight, he'd probably be suffering severe cognitive impairment and hallucinations at this point, which would explain how distraught he was during this whole video. Immediately after, Connor comes clean about one of his lies.
My mom says she believes in God. I fooled her into thinking I believed in God, and she still wasn't happy. Nothing makes sense.
This is one of the clearest demonstrations of Connor's explicit beliefs that he can lie his way into happiness, not just his own, but other people's as well. Of course, this particular lie was pretty easy to see through, since religious people, like Connor's mom, expect that beliefs will change how people behave. But clearly, Connor was set in his ways. Over the course of the video, he becomes increasingly performative, channeling his very real emotions into a vehicle to promote this secret understanding of his and manipulate his parents.
I want people to know this story and spread happiness to the world, because if it goes the wrong direction, I would rather have my arms chopped off, I would rather have my penis chopped off than to feel like this. Mom and Dad, if you truly love me, if you're truly sad about this, just fucking stop. Be happy. Figure out how to do it. Do it for Morgan, you horrible fucking people. I love you, but you're infecting the world. You're making the world go into this literal hell. You made my sister try and commit suicide. You made her think that was my fault. What is your problem?
Of course, he remains conspicuously vague on what his great understandings actually consist of, but that didn't stop him from reprimanding his parents and friends about not getting it. Oddly enough, after accusing his parents of making his sister make an attempt on her own life, he proceeds to dox his location and say this:
You can walk into my bathroom and you can witness what true happiness feels like. You can witness what it's like to actually meet God. As soon as this video is posted, give it 30 minutes and then you can come and witness it too. Maybe it'll make you happy too. It'll show you the way. Please remember, this is not real. It's just acting.
For someone who just complained about being falsely accused of leading someone to self-harm, he sure seems like he's actively promoting it here as the way to find happiness and meet God. If you set aside his spiritual, grandiose implications of the things he's saying here, he's displaying some pretty clear signs of NPD, the main one being threatening to take his own life in order to prove a point and win his family over. Again, this has to do with the fact that he spent years of his life developing his new identity, and now that his parents and friends aren't validating it, he's being met with the painful reality that he has nothing else besides it at this point. This actually has a name. It's called narcissistic collapse, when someone with the disorder experiences a substantial blow to their self-esteem or sense of superiority, resulting in impulsive behaviors, breakdowns, anger outbursts, smearing someone's reputation, making accusations, and a tendency towards self-harm to get attention, control, and sympathy. This video of Connor almost got a full bingo. On the same day as this video went up, a fellow fitness content creator and acquaintance of Connor's named Kenny made a video covering the situation, saying he tried to contact Connor but was unable to, even mentioning rumors that both Connor and his car had gone missing. Fortunately, the worst had not happened, and it turned out that Connor had been sent to a psychiatric facility. In the excerpt of his admission papers we have access to, we can read, "Patient demonstrates a marked alteration in his mental state compared with previous months, specifically with at least 1 week of grandiose and delusional thought that he is God, enlightened, with a special understanding of finding peace in the world, committed to sharing this message with his followers, and ending his life in order to prove he is God or godlike." This led to him writing a note and posting a YouTube video. In the hospital, he denied active ideation, but continues with thought content about needing to die to prove he is God and needing redirection and emergency medication for nonsensical and disorganized thinking and erratic behavior, like trying to scale an exterior wall and being pulled to safety by staff. As dark and insane as all of this is, it's ironic that while in the custody of the psychiatric institution, he tried to climb a wall, which is actually something he'd been widely made fun of for during his brief conflict with H3H3, as many of his videos had a theme of climbing on top of random places. And if ever there was any doubt that narcissism was a piece of Connor's puzzle, here he's described as repeatedly describing himself as God. Now, most pieces of Connor's meltdown focused on, well, his meltdown. For example, Greg Doucette, one of the biggest fitness content creators on YouTube, addressed the video that Connor had just uploaded, focusing mostly on the mental health aspect of it, suggesting that if this was indeed just an act, it was one of the worst things a human could possibly do for attention. Greg also speculated that Connor might have actually gone through with doing something horrible, but within a day of his video, someone who had been personal friends with Connor, Patrick Lyons, responded.
Greg Doucette made a video, and in the video he says he doesn't know whether Connor is dead or alive. Want to clear that up real quick. Connor is definitely alive. I'm recording this on Sunday night. On Saturday, I believe that is May 9th, Connor was found at a store in Venice Beach. And yes, he's alive.
However, Patrick does reinforce that despite Connor not having followed through on the things he said, it wasn't just an act, and that he was genuinely undergoing a mental health crisis.
It's very real and it's serious. And so please treat it as such and don't spread misinformation about this.
Another friend of Connor's named Brett Maverick also commented on Greg's video saying the same thing, and both Brett and Patrick made it a point to preserve Connor's privacy and not mention that he was in a psychiatric institution. Now, while Connor was absent following the goodbye video, with his last normal video being a regular Omegle prank, there were a few things leading up to his meltdown that have been neglected up until this point. First off, there's a set of 6 Instagram stories Connor made right before his meltdown that, as far as I can tell, have only been archived in this obscure video from a Colombian channel.
I've been having these Zoom calls with my random friends, and we've been doing some like acting exercises. It's my dream to be like an actor here in LA, so you guys gotta go check out my YouTube videos because they get crazy. I mean, we take it up a notch. Like, you think acting is like, oh, I'm the mailman, hi. No. We get crazy, completely unfiltered crazy, like so crazy that people start believing it's real. It's the most crazy thing I've ever experienced. And that makes me feel so good. It makes me feel so good as an actor. So go to my YouTube.
Obviously, he's talking about his meltdown here, and once again, he implicitly admits to feeling good whenever he can deceive people into believing something that's not true. Both in this Colombian video and in another piece of coverage of the situation from a fitness YouTuber from Budapest, we can see that prior to his goodbye video, Connor uploaded 7 streams of himself enlightening his manager, his friends, and family. Unfortunately, I've only been able to find links to 3 of them, but that's more than enough to gauge just how insane Connor truly was prior to his final meltdown. In his conversation with his manager can be seen talking about more realistic self-improvement goals, such as letting go of childish motivations such as impressing others, and focusing on things he can achieve in his everyday life. Meanwhile, Connor sounds completely unhinged.
Now think about this. What if Connor Murphy did once have the biggest social media following in the world?
Mm-hmm.
What if it was more than that? What if, again, this is acting,
Yeah.
Connor Murphy was so egotistical
Mm-hmm.
that he wanted to become God?
Ah.
How would he do that? How would he find a series of, like, these sort of enlightenment points
Mm-hmm.
where the limits on the earth fade away? How do you... Is that something that's possible?
You can actually see his manager's facial expression change in real time to confusion and discomfort as Connor starts rambling about becoming God. Once he succeeds at leading his manager to give the answer he was looking for, Connor channels some serious iShow speed.
You don't have to filter yourself because it's a thought experiment.
It would make me a god.
Make you a fucking God, Trucy! You're a fucking God! You know what? Don't you just realize it within yourself?
I think that Connor made so much content based on making people feel uncomfortable on the street that he got addicted to making the people around him recoil and cringe. Soon after the outburst, Connor explains his perspective on what acting is.
This is why I love acting so much, because there's no restrictions. You can do whatever the f- you want and you don't seem crazy. This is why acting is so f***ing cool. It's almost like nothing I say can be taken as crazy. So it's almost as if acting reveals a higher truth. It's almost as if acting is the truth.
There's performance art and method acting, and then there's using acting as an excuse to behave like a crazy person for attention. If you are wondering what accelerated Connor's transformation from a generic YouTuber to whatever this is, in this same video, he actually alludes to it.
Imagine this psychological thriller where people are going through suffering in the world. There's this world of complete and utter suffering. Absolute f***ing suffering, but they don't realize it because they think it's normal.
Yep.
They think it's f***ing normal. And then all of a sudden, they get something happens, something. They could take a weird drug, they could experience a crazy trauma, but something ignites in them. And all of a sudden, they start to realize the real world is a f***ing illusion.
The very first example Connor gave as to what would awaken people is taking a weird drug. And based on the things he's saying, that everything and everyone is God experiencing itself, and that there is no such thing as good or evil, it sounds exactly like every person who got their sanity permanently one-shotted by ayahuasca, one of the most powerful psychedelic drugs in the world that became a lot more popular in the 2010s. While it wasn't confirmed yet that this was the root cause of Connor's so-called enlightenment, this made complete sense. Along with the aforementioned fitness and pickup artist communities, there was a third and less well-known appendage to 2010's online culture, the psychedelic-driven Eastern mysticism community. While it may sound crazy at first, all you need to do is look up names like Alan Watts or Terence McKenna to see just how popular content about using psychedelics as a way to interface with spirituality truly was during this time. While this line of thinking had already been gaining traction since the 1960s, it really accelerated in the late 2000s, as the atheism versus Christianity debates lost popularity, and mainstream people like Joe Rogan actively promoted psychedelic experiences to massive audiences.
These things that you see but you can't define are constantly changing. So if you try to say, oh, it looked like a jester, it probably did for a few seconds.
Many people often compare Connor's rants on enlightenment to fitness YouTuber Frank Yang's esoteric and experimental videos on the same subject matter, but I think a much better comparison is Leo Gura, someone who I've covered in a previous video. Not only did Leo start out by trying to teach people about self-mastery, confidence, and pickup artistry, but he'd already been promoting and advocating for psychedelic use as a means to enlighten oneself for quite some time. Most importantly, just a few months prior to Connor's ultimate meltdown, Leo recorded himself tripping on something believed to be some form of DMT, and he was saying the same kind of bizarre things. That he was God and everyone was also God, that identity was an illusion, that there's no good or evil, so on and so forth.
Which is why I, as God, don't judge any humans or hate any humans or even punish any humans. You might think I punished Hitler. No, I didn't punish it. I love Hitler as much as anybody because I am Hitler. I love the devil as much as anybody because what you don't understand is the only way that I overcome devilry is through complete self-love.
Another alarming coincidence between Leo and Connor is their belief system's trivialization and, on occasion, outright promotion of death as a means of exploring consciousness. Leo himself has acknowledged the passing of 3 of his forum's members at their own hands. If this by itself wasn't intriguing enough, it just so happens that one of these users that took their own lives, Wave in the Ocean, had made a thread talking about how much he identified with Connor's outlook on existence. A little over a year after this thread was made, another user made a thread announcing his untimely passing, saying, "I cannot tell you why he chose to end his life. I know he had some trouble sleeping during long periods and was deeply tormented by this, and I know he had bad thoughts periodically through many years. No matter how many times I try to turn it around, looking at it from different perspectives, it was his decision to make. He discovered life, he discovered love, and now he has also discovered death. What's particularly disturbing about this to me, apart from the obvious, is that only 2 of the people who posted to this thread took issue with the sugarcoating of this man's passing as him discovering death. Worse yet is the fact that a moderator of the forum took issue with someone simply pointing out that Wave was the second person who had lost their life in this way, with this moderator actively telling people not to draw any pattern. When Leo replied, he didn't make any specific comment on the situation. Eventually, the original poster of the thread gave more information on what led Wave to do what he did, saying, "Around when we first met, he had just tried LSD for the first time and had a bad trip, where he felt like the universe said he should take himself out." This original poster also added that Wave had periods of intense mania, much like Connor did. Much later on, Connor and Leo spoke for about an hour in a recorded phone call, most of which consisted of Leo trying to speak a modicum of sense into him, while Connor cracked cringy jokes.
They'll warn you that you have to be careful. When you're coming back from meditation retreat, they'll tell you that don't make any rash decisions. Don't do any giant stunts or moves. Give yourself time to integrate insights, to ground yourself. They even tell you things like, be careful, because when you come back home, you might lash out at your wife or at your girlfriend, or you might want to get a divorce or quit your job or tell your boss to go fuck himself. And just, don't do those things.
While Leo expressed how much he disapproved of what Connor was doing both during this call and elsewhere, some people in Leo's own forum agreed with Connor's message. All of this is to say that the so-called enlightened conclusions that people like Leo and Connor drew from psychedelic experiences aren't exclusive to them. There are many documented instances where psychedelic use, usually DMT, leads people to take their own life in order to cross over to the other side, sometimes even being told by the entities they see while on the substance that they should hurt others in order to prove the meaninglessness of life. While some of these can easily be pushed aside as people who are inexperienced with the substance or who already have pre-existing mental problems, there are cases in which professional shamans who dedicated their entire lives to engaging with it also end up deceased. And to add to that irresponsibility, he immediately proceeds to promote it to everyone he knows with no regard for how that may affect them.
Even though I'm God, God still experiences insecurities. God still experiences everything. There has to be ups and downs. There has to be downs to experience the ups. It's just there's this weird underlying feeling that everything gets better, and it's weird. But anyway.
After getting rather lukewarm results from his manager, he then tries to enlighten his best friend, Brett Maverick, but this goes even worse in comparison because Brett sits there stone-faced for nearly an hour, giving almost no input back to Connor.
And that is, if you really work around that logic, somehow we thought that logic is a disease of the ego, but it's not. The ego is something completely different than we have ever imagined. And it just has to slowly be unraveled. Recognizing the ego as thought is a step. That's what you realize, is that the enlightenment process is realizing truth in the moment, but then at a later level, realizing that it was fake.
If you speed it up, it kind of looks like that video of a kid with ADHD who is studying math and then he's watching a video about Star Wars. As Connor spazzes around and monologues incessantly, and Brett locks in for 54 minutes straight. There are a few interesting tidbits from this upload though, such as Connor saying that he was born 6 days ago, as that's when his ego supposedly died.
I've been working on this. I've been actually born for 6 days now, for 6 days. I think we talked about this earlier, but we are so far past that knowledge that I forgot. But the ego died 6 days ago. Is the 6th day. It's the 6th day at 5 p.m.
Given ego death is commonly cited as a result of DMT trips, that's probably what he was talking about. Additionally, he says he needs to keep doing what he's doing nonstop until the 7th day, as a reference to the book of Genesis, where it says that God rested on the 7th day. But by far, the most interesting one out of this set of videos is when he tries and fails to enlighten his parents, as unlike his talks with other people, they actually grill him a good bit and make him feel less confident about his realizations.
No matter, I know this seems like a giant mind, but you're gonna realize that this has value. So,
okay.
So, I never talked to you about what you did for work. I never really got to know you. I know you as a father, but I don't know you as a friend.
Right.
I don't even blame him. His bald dad with Fox News playing in the background for the entirety of the stream has a Dark Souls boss tier power level. He actually mogs Connor into submission in under 1 minute.
I want you to imagine, how I always wanted you guys to be proud of me?
We are. We always have been.
Will you though? Will you be always proud of me no matter what?
We don't have any choice.
That's not true. It's a falsehood. Like,
That's how we look at it, though. Sure, we're going to stick with you, whatever's got to happen.
During this video, which is so confusing that it's not even worth watching for the most part, Connor is purposely obfuscating a lot more than usual. Probably because he knows he can get away with a lot less of his insanity when he's interacting with his parents. Instead of the terrible things he was saying about them in his goodbye video, here he's congratulating them on how good they were as parents. It seems like this was done intentionally as kind of a love bombing tactic, since immediately after he's done, he pivots to the same enlightenment shtick he was saying to his friends and a manager. It's also clear from their demeanor that they're genuinely concerned for him, but despite how psychotic he seems, they are still overall supportive of his decisions, which is quite surprising given the way he went on to describe them. Eventually, he comes clear about what the point of the stream really was.
you're right. I've been trying to confuse you. Because your understanding of the world is keeping you trapped.
When he tries to convince his parents to stop being Christian and instead recognize that their YouTube prankster son is the true God, they don't really budge, so he changes his strategy. At about 53 minutes into the stream, Connor asks his mom why she isn't experiencing heaven on earth like he claims to be, to which she replies saying that heaven for her would mean she could see her deceased father, something Connor could not provide. Unable to form a cogent answer, this is how he reacts.
See my dad again? Can't do that on Earth, Connor.
Yes, you can. It's incredible.
And just like the previous time he broke into tears while telling them they were great parents, he instantly launches into another effort to enlighten them, equally unsuccessful. With the added context of these streams, what becomes evident is that Connor's meltdown, even if to some extent genuine, was absolutely planned with a few intended outcomes in mind, including but not limited to making the people that resisted his enlightenment, namely his parents, look terrible. So much for ego death and getting past personal grudges. After a month of inactivity, Connor returned to his second channel, Connor Murphy Talks, announcing that he'd been in a psych ward, confirming that the trigger for his meltdown was his ayahuasca ritual, but promising that he would never take another mind-altering substance like that ever again. He also reveals a little more about his inpatient stay, showing that he'd been diagnosed with either drug-induced psychosis or bipolar disorder. However lucid he appears in this video, he reiterated that all of that happened for a greater purpose and that he'd seen through the illusion of death.
The past few weeks have been some of the most self-improvement focused weeks of my entire life. I've had some extremely eye-opening spiritual experiences that have changed my life for the better. I can honestly say that I'm completely free from the illusion of death and that I've been able to fill in some of the gaps between science and religion that I've had in my head. I've even been able to completely rid myself of insecurities and social anxiety that used to haunt me just months ago.
Clearly, there was still something wrong. In the following days, he released a batch of self-improvement-oriented videos about mewing, fasting, and spirituality.
So I believe much of the original story of Jesus has simply been lost in translation. An example of poor translation is like when Jesus turned water into wine. We seem to take this literally, when it simply meant that Jesus gave off so much positive and non-judgmental energy, people started to feel more happy, more loose, more free, as if they just had a glass of wine.
It's clear that he was aiming to make the same kind of content as Leo Gura, down to his delivery and setting. Highlights of this brief period of semi-sanity include him describing how he naturally reversed his hair loss that he's had for years, which is most likely explained by him cycling off of the steroids he was taking, since right around the same time that he stopped losing his hair, he also lost a lot of muscle size. And a little bit of a side note here, but another content creator who specializes in hair transplants eventually reviewed Connor's scalp and claimed that he'd had at least 2 transplants. But of course, this was just speculation. Besides his interesting claims about reversing hair loss, he also released other videos he recorded on the same day as his meltdown, all of which were intended to be acting reels he put together in order to get more gigs as an actor.
Excuse me, sir. I watch YouTube video. Connor Murphy say he. I watch YouTube video. I watch it with my own eyes. he seemed sad.
I'm not sure if casting agents would be impressed by a paranoid schizophrenic calling the cops on himself while doing a terrible and slightly racist Asian accent, but then again, I'm not enlightened. While his alternative medicine and spirituality act held up for a couple of weeks, it wouldn't take long before he had another meltdown.
You guys don't understand. It is incredible to be crazy. I'm free. I'm free from suffering. I'm free from insecurities. I'm free from all mental worry. I'm free from the self. I'm free from this restricted thought, this restricted psychological prison. I tricked the doctors into thinking I'm insane. They thought the goodbye video was real. Don't you get it? Somehow the best psychologists in the world, I manipulated them like my little puppets. They were never in control. They had this delusion that they were in control. But I was in control the entire time. I was doing it for this month-long YouTube stunt to try and wake people up.
This time around, as he had already proved himself to be an unreliable narrator and a generally dishonest person, it failed to get even a fraction of the impact of the previous meltdown. Seeing that he wasn't going to get attention that way, he decided to try something else instead. A 40-day fast that would be live streamed in its entirety to his followers. That is well over a month of nothing but water entering his system. Keep in mind, this is roughly the same thing that fellow esoteric YouTuber Sverige did. The coincidence is so great that both of them were also sun-gazing. But if you've watched my video on Sverige, you know that the end result of his radical fasting and sun-gazing was having a psychotic episode that gave him hallucinations and sent him to a psych ward. Although, I don't think Connor is too scared of the psych ward given his previous familiarity with it. He made it clear in the comment section that his objective with this fast wasn't health, but something else entirely. That something else was, once again, trying to embody Jesus Christ. Just like his stay at the psych ward was originally intended to last for just 3 days to mimic the 3 days between Jesus' death and resurrection, Connor was going to fast for 40 days, like Jesus fasted in the desert. While other fitness influencers speculated that he was going to put himself in the hospital within a week due to how much muscle loss he'd endure as a consequence of the fast, his reasonably concerned viewers repeatedly tried to get mental health services to intervene in Connor's project. These attempts were unsuccessful, as Connor just used them as opportunities to make more content documenting his journey. In the meantime, he gave his audience tutorials on how to naturally enlarge their junk and read hate comments about his fast, all while he gradually became visibly emaciated. At the end of the 40 days, he looked like a skeleton. But fortunately, it didn't seem like the fast had any particularly bad side effects. After his return, he took up a vegan diet for some time and shared his experience with semen retention and no-fap, a video which has 700,000 views as of the writing of my video. Now, as freaky as all of this stuff is, through these videos, you get to see that if he truly applied himself, Connor could have easily pivoted from his prank videos to esoteric health content and started a whole second chapter of his career as a content creator. But due to how misguided his motivation to do this was, along with how controversial he was in the process of changing his format, it made it very hard for him to gain serious followers in that sphere of the internet. Over the rest of the year, he made a video about detaching from his physique, only for his muscles to slowly return as he quote-unquote lean bulked. And I really want to emphasize here, I'm not saying this to make fun of him, but coincidentally, his hairline that he had supposedly saved slowly started receding again, while he wore bandanas to try and hide it, and used older pictures of himself on thumbnails to pretend like it wasn't happening. So many speculated that he was, in fact, back on roids. His main channel went back to chugging along and regularly uploading content, but it was clear that things had changed dramatically. Some of his friends, even if they continued to overall feel positive about him, expressed concern about his mental state. As he seemingly backslid into this deluded state of self, he released a video announcing that he was going to give himself a mega dose of something called an ayahuasca analog, which frankly, I'm not well versed enough in to know what that really means, but I would guess that he means some sort of similar substitute that could have similar effects. This, he claims, will get his pineal gland producing so much DMT naturally that he will be, from then on, permanently tripping on psychedelics for the rest of his life, which he thinks will allow him to see reality for what it really is, instead of the illusion that society lives under. What I do know is that taking a megadose of anything won't make your body start producing whatever it is you took. It's actually quite the opposite. When you take in a chemical that your body produces, your body naturally deregulates that chemical's production. This is why people who take steroids get low testosterone when they hop off gear. I've seen some people speculate that Connor was just lying about this, but in the same video, he records himself orally ingesting the very same substance that he was talking about. Funnily enough, when he turns his phone to the camera to show the date and time, you can see that one of his top visited links is Leo Gura's forum. The thing is, while there's no way to give yourself a permanent psych trip, you can do things like self-induce HPPD, which stands for hallucinogenic perception persistence disorder. When you do that kind of substance more frequently than your brain can handle, you may develop a kind of white noise over your vision, and you may see patterns or wave textures over surfaces. But a permanent impairment to your vision would be the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you make yourself permanently schizophrenic. And I don't mean that in the internet way, I mean that as in you have schizophrenia. As psychedelic use of any kind, let alone these mega doses he's talking about, makes you almost 21 times more likely to develop this condition. Given that Connor already has a hard time differentiating between tripping and actual insanity, I don't think he's too concerned about that possibility. Throughout the couple of videos where Connor documents this experiment of his, he repeatedly emphasizes that the substances he's doing are completely legal and that he's not recommending that other people do it. However, in every other sentence, he makes sure to tell people that what he's doing is the one and only way to see the absolute truth and reach true bliss, which sounds a lot like promoting something that, even if legal, is very dangerous.
So your mind is very conflicted. You have these conflicting views on reality that cause you to suffer, and so this is your mind right now, okay? Now, what psychedelics do, okay? They're gonna start rearranging the puzzle pieces, okay? Like this. And certain psychedelics, definitely like ayahuasca and psilocybin, they're gonna rearrange the puzzle pieces in a order that is closer to the finished puzzle, you could say.
The end of the year marked a significant uptick in strange behavior from Connor. First, he began recording himself doing something that he called tantric premasati yoga with random girls. To put this in simple terms, he basically stopped doing sexually suggestive shirtless prank videos and started doing extremely sexually suggestive yoga with strangers on the street. He also opened up an OnlyFans account, which he promoted in most of his uploads from this era. If there was any hope ever that he would someday rebrand to being a serious, spirituality, and alternative health-oriented channel, that hope was now completely lost as he delved even deeper into racy, attention-seeking antics. Unsurprisingly, this format quickly evolved to include adult film actresses, and sometimes the aftermath of these yoga sessions were also uploaded behind his OnlyFans paywall.
It is going to be really good. We're going to be playing some intense Monopoly. I hope my piece is functioning properly. And yeah, we'll be doing some awesome yoga Monopoly. So
even after completely embracing this new identity, he continued to try and make it out as if all of this was some kind of deep, enlightening acting performance, despite the fact that even after all this time, he continued to be pretty bad at acting.
I have struggled with an addiction since I was 15 years old. And just a matter of months ago, I became aware of it and have overcame it.
As the last bits of hope his audience had evaporated, Connor thought it was the perfect time to really double down on how revolting his content had become. After getting himself a degree that apparently gave him the title Doctor of Spirituality, he announced on YouTube that he would be, there's no way I can really put this in like a really clean way, so he would be swallowing another man's load for health purposes. And of course, there was also a version of it off of YouTube. He did this because in his belief system, cavemen used to also do this in order to unlock secret primal powers. I bet there's a lot of weird stuff that cavemen did. They were living in caves after all, but I seriously doubt that they were guzzling glizzies in the Neolithic. I mean, even if they did, if you want to be a caveman, I feel like there are a lot of things to do before you get to the stage of sipping the Chris Chan special Fanta. Later on in the video, he claims that his Coombe protocol has led to an improvement in his physique, but honestly at that point, just take Tren. Your hairline is already going the way of the dodo. Just stop pretending like you've ascended beyond beyond your aesthetics and embrace the gear. At least then you're not slurping another man's nectar for gains. Alternatively, just admit you're doing it because you like doing it. This degree of cope is simply too much.
My physique has gotten better. My physique has gotten so much better over the past several weeks. It's been incredible, and I contributed a lot to this. And so I thought, wow, what if I got even more of this, right? So essentially the balance of this energy in my body was like above baseline, right? I'm like, wow, I've got to try this out. And so I messaged Nikolai. Because I heard that, I mean, you eat this too, right?
Yeah,
like sometimes.
yeah, for sure. You know, I have done my fair share because I figured out, like, I looked at the benefits too as well, and I figured I would give it a try at least.
Interestingly enough, the guy who provides Connor with his supplements, Nikolai, also recorded himself getting berated by his family members for taking part in this and posted it online.
Mom, we were just making a YouTube video.
Okay, so then let me see it.
You could still, I'll show you the video.
I saw the video, and he tells you if you want to see you suck his or yours to go to the OnlyFans. So it's either his OnlyFans or your OnlyFans. And everybody goes on Instagram and sees Nick with a guy. Isn't that great? Grandma, Anthony, everybody, Allie, Will, everybody sees my son in a gay act or a potential gay act. And then you gotta explain to them, oh, but it's not really what you think. And they look at you like you got two heads on, like I'm an asshole. And that they're supposed to believe that. Yeah, Nick.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry doesn't cut it.
I mean, this guy just had to know how this looked, right? There's no way that he got into this situation without realizing what it looked like. Additionally, if all of that wasn't bad enough, Connor didn't even put in an effort to make this interesting for the new crowd of gay guys who were signing up to him and Nikolai's OnlyFans to see some action. Based on one of the reviews that someone left, Nikolai does the work, so to speak, all on his own for 10 minutes straight, and right at the end, Connor comes in, collects the fluids while staying as far away from him as possible, and then drinks it, but not before he mixed it with some kind of berry sauce. After all that talk, he couldn't even raw dog the man juice. He had to mix it with something sweet to get it down. What an absolute poser. But this was only the beginning. Within 1 month of this incident, Connor also revealed he'd been drinking his own urine, which he celebrated by making an actual song about it.
With a glass of piss, I drink my wee so I can feel alright. I drink my wee and I can sleep at night. Every morning when I wake up, I put
a few days after this revelation, Connor added that his reasons for drinking man juice weren't just health related, but they were also spiritual. To justify this, he brings up a Gnostic sect from the 2nd century that believed that Jesus intended for his followers to also drink his own man juice. What he neglected to mention is that this same group also advocated for people to smear their hands with female time of the month excrement and to eat babies. Unless Connor has some serious Patrick Bateman stuff going on that we don't know about, I'm guessing that this is just him cherry picking information to justify his histrionic whims like usual. But as deranged as he already seemed, as April 2021 neared its end, his insanity kicked into high gear as he began making extremely incoherent uploads to his YouTube account, most of which got unlisted or outright taken down. The most apt way that I can describe these uploads is that Connor was trying to emulate the off-putting editing that Frank Yang had in his videos, but with less than 1/10 of the editing skills required to carry them out, resulting in a garbled mess of visuals with no discernible meaning. As the month of May began, one of Connor's ayahuasca trips seems to have transported the soul of a black person from 1980s New Orleans into Connor's body, as he began speaking with an accent and just never stopped.
I apologize in advance for the particularly psychologically constructed inconvenience. I'm not giving a flying It doesn't exist, motherfuckers. It doesn't exist. You're free. You're free as a motherfucker. It's your infinite imagination.
For context, the rest of the video consists of him trying to play a Coldplay song on the violin and not doing a great job of it. As you can see behind him, his apartment is being overrun by indistinct trash, and funnily enough, despite his altered state, at about a minute in, he stops to admire himself. Over the course of the following days, he grows increasingly manic, most of which was captured on his Instagram account, which, in turn, was covered by Derek from More Plates, More Dates.
Do you know what in the world right now is going on?
You've been pranked, motherfucker! Coronavirus is fucking real!
I'm surprised that post is still up, dude. Like, how'd that not get taken down?
While Derek completely blurs it out here, he mentions that Connor had just posted an Instagram story consisting of a screen recording that showed every single password he had saved on his phone, including the ones to his bank accounts. Even for Connor's standards, this was pretty radical. And once again, people became concerned for his mental health. Within one day of Derek's upload, what people feared became true, and once again, Connor was going through a full-blown psychotic episode, very much in line with the last one. One interesting aspect of this, though, is that instead of targeting his parents like he did last time, this time he targeted none other than Jake Paul, with a video titled, "Jake Paul Touched Me Without My Consent." So this video starts out with another man's voice in the background, which means that there was someone else with him during this recording that, for whatever reason, wasn't doing anything to stop him from doing what he was about to do. Immediately, he goes right into his terrible acting and bizarre accent.
Yeah. Tell me what's going on. Alright guys, this video is extremely hard for me to film. I know my videos have been silly recently, but this is 100% serious. I know I've been acting kind of crazy over the past year, and never really told anyone about this, but it all stems from one of the creepiest, most horrific experiences that I had with Jake Paul around 2019. And I've been afraid to tell this story because I feel like people won't believe me, because I've lost credibility. And Jake Paul is powerful, he has lawyers, and he scares the living hell out of me.
Moments after this, he claims that he only ever did ayahuasca in the first place because he was trying to recover from the trauma that Jake inflicted on him. However, it's clear this is yet another epic prank on Connor's part, as he pivots to inviting Jake to a naked wrestling match and claims that Jake is a hermaphrodite who gave him syphilis. Due to how long past relevance Connor was, this really had no effect, and it only got the attention of people who were already well aware that Connor was out of his mind. In the effort of doing absolutely anything in order to get attention, he proceeds to drop more videos in which he rekindles his beef with H3H3, and most damningly, Connor makes a very weird remark about himself.
This is serious, I repeat, this is serious. This is serious, I repeat, this is serious. I am a pedophile and I am, admitting it for the better good. So essentially, H3H3 made me do it. You understand that? H3H3 made me do it. So to see how reality doesn't make much sense, same with things with like prostitution. So essentially, I can just hire prostitutes and film it, and that's considered pornography. Like, the law doesn't make any sense. That's why you gotta follow me, because I am the second coming of Jesus Christ. Duh. So
That's very interesting. So, yeah,
The explanation he gives for saying these things is that his TikTok account got banned for posting videos of his yoga sessions, but according to him, the platform allowed illegal content involving children to be posted. But if this was truly his motivation, he wouldn't have packaged the video this way. And to make matters worse, he goes on to claim that Leo Gura and his dad are in on it.
So essentially, we made some fake child pornography because TikTok is allowing child pornography. I want TikTok to go to hell and die because they deleted my account for doing prima sati yoga. They deleted my account for doing prima sati mother yoga when they allow child pornography on the sites. So TikTok, the only thing that you could possibly do is say you're in on it to help spread the truth. You're in on it. Everyone's in on it. Leo Gura is in on it. My dad has been in on it. Okay, everyone is a genius. In fact, everyone is just playing the
You are the last person to be in line, and it will be the Hunger Games. There will be a great purge of love.
No matter how much he tries to retroactively frame these videos as some kind of avant-garde performance, it's clear there's little more to it than him just losing his mind.
So, yeah, let's have a giant war with China. There will be nukes go off, but I am the second coming of Jesus Christ, and I will protect all of you. We will do a giant meditation in Zilka Park, and we will have the extraterrestrials help us. You understand?
Oh, c'est so excellent. I can't wait to join you in heaven.
While Connor's sanity meter dried up at a freefall speed, one of the people who had been long familiar with his story, Kenny, tried to intervene and prevent him from further worsening the situation.
Because, alright, so I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard from people that you've been taking ayahuasca like every couple hours. I don't know if that's true.
Yes, that is true. And trust me, Kenny KO is definitely not taking ayahuasca every 2 hours either. And the government is not either. The government would never be in on it, would they? Okay. Anyway, yes, I'm taking it every 2 hours.
Like, do you have people to talk to? I don't know if you're currently under the influence of psychedelic. Are you under the influence right now?
Hi. There's orgies. Kenny, there's orgies going on in Austin. It's 6th Street. It's a pure orgy.
So, I guess, are you under the influence right now?
Oh, stop! I just talked to the cops. They loved it. Because they're in on it too. Check my story. Check my Instagram post. I just talked to the cops and they're in on it.
Is the cops because you talked to them or because people are calling them on you?
Both. I called them because I wanted to collaborate with them. And also people are calling. And so it's very fun.
From his strange accent to all the bits of forced fake laughter he punctuates his speech patterns with, it's clear that he's been setting this up to eventually go back and claim that it was all a convoluted prank. This kind of dynamic has been observed in other people who, after getting a lot of attention for humiliating themselves online, try to rewrite the narrative as if it was their master plan all along, and they were the ones trolling the trolls. The only difference in Connor's case is that he knows he'll humiliate himself beforehand, but that doesn't make it any better. As Kenny tries to extract something resembling a meaningful answer out of him, Connor just continues to say nonsensical bullshit.
So what's the end goal with what you're doing?
Worldwide orgy.
That's the end goal.
Yeah, for now.
Connor.
In another interaction between the two from this same time period, Kenny seemingly convinces him to stop doing ayahuasca every few hours, but as we know by now, Connor's words aren't exactly reliable, so we can't necessarily take what he says at face value. A week after this interaction, a woman named Jane Conquest posted a half-hour video detailing her experience with Connor, saying that he initially seemed to be normal when they met in person for a video shoot. While she discovered during the shoot that he frequently did ayahuasca, she wasn't familiar with what that meant and assumed he was otherwise a regular content creator. A few weeks later, he invited her over to his house despite them not having interacted since the last time they had met. When she got there, she immediately stumbled into the nightmarish hoarder hellhole that his house had become.
The stack of boxes was so huge that it took up half of the apartment and spilled out through the front door. Connor apologized for it being so messy, but said that he hadn't had time to clean because he'd been so busy making content.
I've just been so focused on getting up all this content. I just haven't had time to clean.
This took place when Connor was already well into his episode, but even then, Jane maintained that most of it was played up for attention, as whenever the cameras were off, he behaved a lot more normal. As she helped him clean up his place, she discovered rotten food all over his apartment, left in places nowhere near his kitchen. After hours of cleaning up, which she was doing by herself since all Connor did was wander around aimlessly inside his own apartment, Jane asked him for water, at which point he revealed that he had no water in his apartment and they'd have to go to the grocery store to get some. When they went to his car to drive to the store, it turned out that his Porsche was overloaded with garbage and literally stinking. But despite her suggestion of using her car, he insisted that they drive there in his rat-infested Porsche. While she didn't know at the time, he was under the influence of ayahuasca as he drove, and halfway to the store, he decided that they'd be going to the park to shoot content. Of course, by content, Connor meant more incoherent ramblings, which according to Jane, he spent hours upon hours recording, all while she still needed water. Once it became dark out, they finally went to get some water, and Connor also bought a bunch of other random items items that totaled over $200. Based on how much random trash was piled up at his place, he most likely engaged in this kind of impulse buying on a daily basis. When they got home, Jane went to put the groceries in the fridge, and it was at this moment that she entered the kitchen for the first time, only to accidentally stumble upon something dark.
That is when I went into the kitchen for the first time. There was ayahuasca all over the counter. I asked Connor, how often do you do ayahuasca? And he said, every 2 hours. I did not know that Connor was high until then because he mixed the ayahuasca with like health juices, and so I only saw him drinking those.
This frequency is the kind of thing that will definitely give you long-lasting brain damage, so it's not surprising that he was behaving erratically. Jane also includes a few clips that she recorded without Connor's knowledge, and it turns out that while his extremely manic behavior is a lot tamer when he's not shooting, he does the fake New Orleans accent constantly. Finally, after an entire day of cleaning and recording Connor's rants, Jane went home. But once she left, the person who introduced her to Connor, Andrew, went to Connor's house. Andrew was shocked by the state of Connor's place, as according to him, it was usually very organized. He immediately connected the dots and realized that the hoarding was a symptom of Connor's constant tripping, and he had a long conversation with Connor about taking a break from the substances, which according to him, Connor agreed to. But, of course, he was lying, and immediately after Andrew left, he continued to trip, and that is the moment when he leaked all of his passwords and bank info online.
Every single password on his phone that is saved, like every single account he has and the email associated with it, so like Bank of America, Amazon, even his Bang Energy password apparently, or the account to log in.
When Jane returned the next day, there were even more packages and trash in his house, and he claimed to have only slept for 30 minutes that night. Back when he had his first psychotic break, he made a similar claim about not having slept for a whole week. When Jane asked him to delete his bank info from Instagram, as he had already lost $9,000 as a consequence, he answered, claiming that since he was God, he had to give it to his followers. Now the natural question is, where were the police in all of this? Well, apparently they were pretty useless in this situation, as they couldn't seem to commit Connor to a psych ward despite his circumstances. Meanwhile, Jane, along with a couple of other people, including a mental health counselor who was concerned for him, spent the next few days trying to clean his apartment and get him to stop using substances and start going to the gym again to return to his normal state. However effective this strategy was for a brief period, Jane was eventually advised to stop visiting Connor as his behavior was escalating. Now, he was fixated on a plan to fake his own death by crashing his Porsche, and even after being dissuaded from this idea by a counselor, he became very aggressive with the people who were still at his place helping him clean it up. After this absolute peak of intensity, he started a live stream in which he announced he was going to take his own life. Fortunately, this did not happen, as instead he just took a bike ride to the park and came back. Although it seems that at this point, he was under the delusion that he and Jane had become engaged due to a joke video they had recorded days prior. During this part of his episode, someone contacted Jane to inform her that Connor was on Discord, sending people voice notes of himself.
Look this shit up. Look up urine therapy, up eating your own feces, because it's like a so essentially you intake the feces and the bacteria are attenuated bacteria and it is a perfect it's just like taking a mother it's quite, people have been doing it since ancient times. That's why dog eats the shit when they are sick. I would look that up because I think that could cure you in a week, but I could be wrong. I've known to be grandiose.
After he doxed himself and his entire family, he started making claims about owning illegal material, which attracted the attention of law enforcement, although he had an easy time redirecting them. Now, when he's talking to the cop, he also makes a random mention of H3H3 Productions, and the reason why is because one of Connor's consistent delusions is that H3H3 is running a CP operation. Eventually, the counselor who was visiting Connor on a daily basis finally made a little bit of progress and got him to throw out some of his ayahuasca stash, but after days of Connor updating his social media every 15 minutes, he went completely dark. And when Jane went to his apartment to see if his car was there, she found it was gone. The first thought on everyone's mind was that he had carried out his plan and crashed his Porsche. While trying to put the pieces together and reverse engineer what Connor had been doing over the past couple of days, Jane discovered that Connor had done the same thing he did with her with another girl. This girl, named Teresa, was invited over to his house along with another guy for no particular reason. And during their stay, Connor developed the delusion that this 19-year-old girl was was actually a 15-year-old who was also a prostitute named Wanda, and so he started publicly posting about this girl online. There's no real explanation as to why this happened, but it is at this point that Teresa revealed a new piece of information, which was that after a particularly bad overnight bender, Connor's father called him up and told him to go to a mental hospital, saying that he would be flying to where Connor was the next day. While it seemed that Connor initially complied before anyone knew what he was about to do, he smashed his computer to the point that it was unusable and wiped his phone before giving it, along with all of his credit cards, to a few of his friends, before leaving his house to, in his own words, go to the beach. Although his phone was locked behind an Apple ID, calls were still coming through to it, and eventually, Connor called his own phone.
Okay, because this is very interesting. I need you to go to the police immediately, because when I tried to go to the psych ward, there was a man, his name was, and he is working for the government. He is with Jake Paul and H3. He is holding me hostage.
In case you're confused what's going on here, Connor is claiming that he's being held hostage by a man he met in the psych ward, although the proof that this man even existed was never provided. When the police were contacted over these claims, they discovered that the phone number Connor was calling from belonged to a random college student, and it's unknown how Connor even got access to that person's phone. Finally, after all of this back and forth over the course of 10 days and the involvement of Connor's family and the police, his sister notified everyone that Connor was now in an institution and not in any kind of danger. A little while after this situation had been kind of resolved, Micah, one of the people who was frequently visiting Connor to help him, posted a compilation of recordings he made during his stay with Connor, showing just how deranged he was during this period.
I just took some ayahuasca and it was absolutely disgusting. It tasted like Brian Venus, and trust me, I've been there many times. My name is Stewie Griffin in Belle Delphine. You like this? I'm about to eat some vegan macaroni and cheese. Vegan. It's made out of plants, just like your... It keeps me back to my childlike sense of wonder. That childlike sense of wonder. Let's see. I forgot what I'm going to say. I'm not a very smart individual, but anyway, Belle Delphine. Would you like to engage? Of the Cuddle Kingdom.
Unfortunately, unlike his last stay at the ward, which was long enough to instill a sense of normalcy in him that lasted a few months at least, he got out as soon as he could, and it was very clear that nothing had improved.
I made it out. I'm out of the psych ward. I'm out of the psych.
As soon as he was back, he started uploading more of his nonsensical, conceptual videos, this time centered around the idea that he had taken his own life and reincarnated as someone named Sevon. This particular delusion seems to have been kicked off by a theater play called Dear Evan Hansen, which has a character called Connor Murphy who takes his own life. Now, besides acting, he was also convinced that he was a singer.
Love of mine, y'all are so divine. I know I crossed the line. I feel my soul fading to black.
After this, he released a video that wasn't archived, in which he released the book he started writing during his first psychotic break in 2020, and then continued to write during his 40-day fast. Now, I'm not going to get into the minutia contained in this book due to a lot of it being totally just like unreadable, but we do have a few highlights here that I would like to point out. They're very jokery. Who do you want to truly be? Someone who's normal and suffering, or someone who's crazy and happy? If you ask yourself that question and look deep enough within, you'll start to realize that the urge to be normal is true insanity. You'll start to realize that people like me aren't the ones in psychosis. Humanity is. Truly, the guy who needs to take copious amounts of psychoactive substances every 2 hours is the one who's really happy. Go off king. Soon after this little tidbit, he starts criticizing society's perception of psychedelics and says that he has absolutely no idea what could have caused the negative PR it has. Again, an astounding lack of self-awareness. I cannot think of anyone who has done more negative PR for psychedelics than Connor Murphy. Even more ironic is that he immediately follows it up by saying that those substances need to be taken responsibly. But as we know, if anyone should have heard this advice, it was Connor. As far as what got him to go down this path in the first place, he credited music festivals and author Sam Harris, who advocated for psychedelic use under specific circumstances, among a few other pop philosophers like Eckhart Tolle. soul. The thing about Sam Harris is, before he became known as an online intellectual, he was one of the leading figures of new atheism in the 2000s, and of course, Connor was very interested in that as well. In a passage he wrote about his early life, he said, "I was raised in a standard Catholic household. Religion stopped making sense to me at a very young age. From a young age, I was always a critical thinker. Somehow, I was just resistant to brainwashing. I didn't believe anyone or anything until I thought it through with logic. I don't know where this superpower came from, but it truly is a superpower. This open-mindedness is what allowed me to experience a spiritual awakening so early in life. But back then, it was the cause of a lot of suffering. I felt segregated from the rest of my community, and I had to hide this feeling for my entire childhood. How could I be the only one that thought this way? How could every single person I knew blindingly believe a story out of a book? I was frustrated by how arrogant religious people are. How do they know their way is the truth? And how can they be so discriminatory to people who don't think the same way as they do? I started to realize there's no way these people truly believe in their religion. There is no way a person can truly believe that in just a few decades, they'll spend the rest of eternity in heaven, yet still be so unhappy. It's impossible. I was right. Knowing what I know now, if you are truly free from the illusion of death, if you truly believe a part of you is eternal and lives after the body dies, it is 100% impossible to be unhappy. It just is. Now, if you just have faith, if you're only 95% sure of an afterlife, it's extremely possible to be unhappy. In fact, it's impossible to reach true happiness. I've always acknowledged that I'd rather be a blissful schizophrenic than a depressed realist PhD in neuroscience. The issue was, no matter what I did, I couldn't get myself to believe in the fantasy. My logical mind just wouldn't let me do it. It's quite interesting to see how Connor describes religious people as arrogant and immediately bridge it to claiming that none of them are capable of being happy, and only he, with his greater understanding and logical superpowers, can truly be happy. I mean, I don't know. He didn't seem too much of a jolly fellow when he was trying to uncover the H3H3 Keemstar CP conspiracy that he made up in his mind. The book closes with Connor expressing his frustration at the doctors and society in general, who expected him to live without the level of stimulation that he got from his drug-addled psychotic state. I think it became clear at this point for everyone that if you look past all of Connor's philosophical meandering, at heart, he's really just a drug addict. He wants to feel high forever, and despite how much he denies it, he is totally unhappy with the fact that people expect him to do anything besides getting high. As a matter of fact, he's unhappy whenever he isn't experiencing a high. Right around the same time that Connor got out of the psych ward, More Plates, More Dates made an update to this story, which happened to include another fitness creator, Leo and Longevity. Keep that name in mind because it's definitely going to come up later. In the meantime, it was revealed that Connor had a Discord server for his closest followers. Because, yes, he somehow had some followers left, most of whom were as deranged as he was.
So, yesterday, when Con Murphy was streaming, right, I was drinking my own divine protein shake. Okay? So many people might find that it's disgusting.
Immediately upon his return, Connor tried to get all of his followers to go to Leo Gura's forum and implicitly claim that Leo was responsible for what had been happening to Connor. Leo quickly took action, banning any discussion of Connor and his antics to prevent any situation from developing. In better news, a little while after his return, despite him maintaining the RIP Connor Murphy facade, he started golfing again, which is, at the very least, better than being alone in his apartment all day. During this period, he also became obsessed with framing his entire life as if it were a Hollywood production, which I suppose comes from the fact that his acting career had failed to launch. Another fixation that came with it was coming out as gay, for reasons I have yet to really figure out.
So concurrently, I am sitting here about to play some songs for you guys, but you're gonna help me write a coming out as gay song. I am gonna come out as gay in a lyrical tune, and you are going to help me. Thank you. I am Jesus. I am the second coming of Jesus. Yes, that is very true. I'm the best golfer on the planet. I'm the best at everything, but I'm also the most unintelligent because everyone is in on it. So you see, I am just realizing that there has been a play going on called...
Fortunately, this time around, his mania was taking place within the safe confines of his father's supervision, which seemed to, at least in the short term, curb the super self-destructive aspects of his behavior. Kenny also eventually did another follow-up interview with Connor, which had some pretty interesting moments.
Hey Mike, what's your thoughts on Connor ingesting...
Oh, I think that's the most thing ever.
However tenuous this balance that they struck seemed, it was much better than what Connor had before. So for a brief time, things looked slightly better, but that didn't mean that Connor wasn't being Connor.
So why am I making this video? One, because I'm the second coming of Jesus Christ and I need you to listen to me. Please send this to all the news outlets that you can possibly think of. Drama Alert, Scarce, Philip DeFranco, and tell them that I am evil. Second of all, I'm doing a play for mental health awareness. It is called Dear Evan Hansen. I'm playing off the play Dear Evan Hansen because reality is a play. It is God's play. Okay? You are God, looking through different windows.
His delusions continued to ramp up as he was convinced that he was banned from a golf tournament for being gay, and began telling people online that he had never taken ayahuasca and that it was all part of the play, in his own words. For whatever reason, these beliefs inspired him to read unedited passages of Huckleberry Finn that that contain the N-word and only those ones. It's at this point that he tried to turn his small following into a cult that recognized him as the second coming, but fortunately it never came to fruition. After announcing himself as a new member of the Flat Earth community, his ability to string together a coherent sentence came and went, and within the following weeks, things grew increasingly bizarre once again. He was accused of multiple non-consensual interactions by a girl named Lauren, and these interactions actually became high profile enough that it was covered by Business Insider. According to the article, Lauren said that she took issue with Connor not wearing a condom and said he could have an STD, to which he replied, "I am God, it's impossible." The article also contains a screenshot of the DMs that she sent to Connor, demanding that he take their video down, claiming that he did indeed give her an STD, and reiterating that he had taken advantage of her. The author of the article also contacted the police in Lauren's area to confirm that she had indeed filed a report on Connor to ensure that this wasn't a publicity stunt, and indeed a report had been filed. Lauren also claims that Connor had a fixation with engaging in intercourse with her while she slept, completely unprompted, which would also fall in the category of assault. Connor eventually responded to her in a now privated video, where he actually behaved normally for once, and showed that Lauren had signed a contract to do OnlyFans videos with him. There seems to be proof in his video that the activities that went on between them were indeed consensual.
Alright guys, so I'm here with my sister Morgan. So not only did this girl that I'm going to show you and have this conversation with accuse me of raping her, but she accused me of raping my sister in order to get back at me and try and turn my friends against me. So I would just, Morgan, did anything like that ever happen?
But despite how intense the situation was, it was only the beginning. He proceeded to record himself eating sand from a beach. He made a video of him kissing other guys on the lips, claimed to have gotten himself kicked out of his dad's house. He got adopted by another family and shaved his head completely bald, invaded a golf course in the middle of a tournament in the name of gay pride, got back together with a girl who got an article about him written accusing him of non-consensual activities, and then tried to make it out as if the accusations were all part of the play.
So anyway, we're gonna try not to cut off the foreheads here. Anyway, I'm here with Lauren in San Diego. Say hi, Lauren. And what did I pull, Lauren? What did we pull? Can you say the words? Because I know it's your word.
Uno reverse card.
Uno reverse card. Yay. Anyway.
By the way, I should also mention that during this period, he was frequently alternating between his New Orleans accent, his impression of Stewie from Family Guy, and also Mickey Mouse.
Why, hello, I'm Mickey Mouse, and this is a family-friendly channel. Where's my sister? And this video is part of a play. It's a plan. Here's a clue. 31st of May. You can get away with anything if you're gay, so get in on the plan today.
While he had failed to turn his following into his cult and personal army, he continued to claim to have a cult, specifically a cult primarily composed of Asian computer hackers. After this, he announced that he would be selling himself as a slave, and after that, he recorded himself eating his own excrement. And then he filmed himself engaging in intercourse with a latex doll with a picture of H3H3's wife, Ela Klein, on the head of the doll. When he finished, he ate what came out. He ate what came out. Okay, he ate it. He ate it. Now, it seems like he was doing these things partially because he was crazy, but also partially for attention. But when it didn't get him the attention he was really craving, he claimed that he had predicted an explosion that took place in December, and he then invited his cult to make a diss track on Leo Gura.
Leo Gura,
Pinky and the brain. If I told you how I met your mother, you go more insane. Not conceding to reality, no biological birth. But Miss Gura begs to differ as she compliments my girth.
One of the patterns you may have noticed with Connor at this point is to gratuitously bring up other people with whom he had some kind of static or beef in the past to rile their community up by any means necessary, without any provocation. When that didn't work either, he made an Instagram post claiming that he had gotten Lauren, the same girl who had accused him of unconsensual interactions, pregnant. He followed this up by making a video with his parents, his real parents, where he claimed that Lauren had been adopted by them and was now his sister. There's so much downright nonsensical stuff from this period that it's barely worth covering as Connor continued to descend into insanity. In late 2021, he attempted a kind of revival by collaborating with another fitness YouTuber and bringing back his regular prank content. But whenever Connor did something new where he was seemingly sane for 1 second, everyone knew that it was just a matter of time before he had another meltdown. As the developments in his story seemed to slow down, in May 2022, YouTuber SunnyV2 covered Connor, and in response, a few months later, Connor made a nearly 2-hour-long documentary about himself, framing it as if it were a real movie. In it, he claims that all of the time that he dedicated to fitness and bodybuilding was done with the explicit purpose of infiltrating that community and subverting it from the inside. Again, this is another one of his attempts to rewrite his own narrative to make it grander than it actually is. Despite all of this talk about ego death, he is obsessed with how he's perceived, and he's desperate to inject some kind of meaning into everything that's been happening since his first meltdown in 2020. The possibility that all of his enlightenment was just a grandiose waste of time was the one possibility that Connor consistently neglected. But right as the time was coming for yet another rehash of the same antics, something different happened. Just as Connor was preparing to move in with fellow fitness YouTuber Tony Huge in Thailand to do ladyboy content, the other person who was living with Tony, the aforementioned Leo and Longevity, suddenly passed away. According to the women who found Leo's body and fitness YouTuber John Bravo, who covered Leo's passing in depth, Leo hadn't interacted with anyone for a while prior to his untimely passing, and the cause of his death was mysterious. While it wasn't obvious someone else was responsible for what happened to him, it was also unlikely that he took his own life, as he had a wife and 2 kids at the time of his death. Additionally, there was some bruising on his body that could have indicated some kind of struggle. While Tony lived in the same house as Leo, he was allegedly away for the time being as he was recording content with Connor, so he didn't find out until after the fact. When an autopsy was conducted by Thai officials, the results were kept from the public, and the possibility of foul play wasn't ruled out, which spurred on a lot of speculation and rumors. The police found that the doorknob from the inside of the bathroom Leo's body was found in had been forcefully pulled out of the door, which would be pretty consistent if Leo had been locked in from the outside. The place he was living was also in a general state of disrepair, with things strewn all over the place, but upon searching it carefully, police found steroids, weed, antidepressants, and sleeping pills. Even more concerning is that just a few days prior to his passing, he posted an Instagram story where he expressed a wish to move to another country. Eventually, the authorities did release the pre-autopsy report that listed the cause of death as murder. After Leo's passing, whenever Tony Huge returned to the city of Pattaya, he claimed that there were people following him, whom he referred to as stalkers. In an interview that Tony gave to John Bravo over a year after Leo's passing, he alleged that Leo had gotten involved with a woman and assaulted her. Because of the circumstances of Leo's death, people were already pretty suspicious of Tony for quite some time, but this interview invited even more negative attention. In the comments, people pointed out that Tony's story changed many times, with one of the strangest aspects being that he was there to hear Leo assaulting this woman, but despite literally hearing her scream for help, he did nothing to stop it, and didn't tell anyone about it after the fact.
She was screaming, and he was trying to like choke her to stop her from screaming. And it just made her scream more. So that's what his argument was. I mean, she wasn't drunk, but maybe she's crazy, you know? So I don't think she's crazy. I just think she'd never been in this situation before. I think she was just freaked out because she'd never been with like a more masculine, aggressive guy. And I'm not I haven't said anything about like whether what I think is bad or good.
Yeah.
But I will say that the way Leo was with women works.
Either he's lying here to besmirch Leo and suggest that what happened to him came as a consequence of what he supposedly did to this woman, or this did happen, and Tony thinks that that kind of situation is normal.
This is some kind of the red pill stuff that I wanted him to talk about more, because although I never saw it go to that extreme, I did see a lot of it, and it was interesting because in my situation, I'm the one being abused by the women. And Leo said it's because I'm not
you're too
using my
easy.
masculine power to keep them in check.
You're too easy going.
And so he's keeping the women in check, and I'm not keeping them. And which one's better? What, like, his way is the Muslim way, or whatever the Middle Eastern thing is what he says?
Neither option is really good, and regardless of which is true, Connor didn't really heed this as any kind of good warning sign, and instead, he moved in with Tony in Thailand, meaning he was walking into a pretty dangerous situation, and that, combined with his proclivity to crash out due to substance abuse, was definitely not a good combination. While it is true that the year 2022 was relatively uneventful compared to previous years, it was full of more milestones in Connor's decline, as he continually steeped himself deeper in pretty much just not safe for work content, eventually outright filming an entire video with a ladyboy, none of which I want to see or would even show you if I could for obvious reasons. He also boldly got back on steroids and did a little bit of right-wing bait content.
Toxic masculinity, the phrase that ruined my life. As feminist propaganda percolated through Western society, the masculine identity I had created seemed no longer welcome.
I actually identify as a woman.
I should mention that this bait content was particularly malicious since in these videos where he's doing kind of a conservative YouTuber act, he seems to be specifically imitating Leo and longevity, which was taken by some as him and Tony purposely mocking Leo after his passing. Additionally, in his Not Safe for Work video with a ladyboy, he reenacted Leo's death.
Basically, he was having sex with a man, I'm not going to say the word on here, a man that looks like a woman. And while they were having sex, something happened. That man, who looks like the woman, knocked him out, and he was wearing a black shirt, the same as when Leo died, when he's knocked down with no pants on the floor, and it looked like the bathroom scene when Leo's body was found.
Pairing this with how quickly Connor moved into Leo's room after his passing, and how many believe that Tony is somehow implicated, this makes an extremely morbid picture. In 2023, Connor created a new YouTube channel, although the content was still the same, with most of it being Connor repeatedly rehashing his own story and occasionally attempting to respond to the people who made videos about him. Ultimately, this is the kind of content he has reduced himself to releasing. For someone who pontificated so much about being free and not following people's expectations, he seems to have mentally locked himself in to endlessly reliving his 2020 meltdown and then reacting to how other people reacted to it. Because of it, he keeps doing the same thing over and over again, year after year, expecting something to change. It is the definition of insanity.
And I thought it would be fit to end it all in the same setting from which I began this crazy chapter of my social media content.
And there's a reason why I'm saying goodbye to you all exclusively.
What he doesn't seem to realize is that when people feel compelled to relive a situation that happened in their life, it's usually because they suffered some kind of trauma that they haven't yet understood. Like I said before, he needs to believe that he's happy and that he didn't make any mistakes. Otherwise, he has to confront the possibility that he threw 5 years of his life and countless opportunities down the drain, which is a pretty grim prospect for a 30-year-old man to consider. And this inability to self-reflect leads him to his episodes, each worse than the last. On May 1st, 2024, a Thai news outlet published an article reporting that Connor had hit his girlfriend with a golf club, claiming that it was for content creation. According to the people who called the incident into the police, Connor was screaming incoherently and destroying household items, and when the cops got there, he locked himself in the bathroom. The fact that Connor assaulted his Thai girlfriend and proceeded to lock himself in the bathroom is something that a lot of people feel is reminiscent of the speculations around Leo and longevity's story, which just makes the entire thing really, really ominous. Eventually, audio of Connor screaming during the incident was released, and it's just as funny as it is haunting. Recordings of the state Connor left the house in show that the entire place was absolutely trashed and that there was blood all over the place. And it turns out he wasn't just living with his girlfriend, but also her 16-year-old sister. This in and of itself adds an entire other dimension of questionability to the entire situation, since in the best case scenario, this teenage girl had to witness her sister get pummeled with a golf club. Despite his claims that all of this was for content and no one actually got hurt, Connor got a massive gash on his body from, according to the article, being cut cut with a large piece of glass. Around a month after the incident, he ended up posting a short video in which he suggested that the gash was the result of an attack from his girlfriend, although this isn't confirmed.
Meet Lucy, a realistic blue avatar style sex doll. So, why did we invite Lucy into our humble abode? Well, in an attempt to mitigate Fairy's jealousy. See, Fairy patently appears as the cutest human being in existence. But when jealousy strikes, she makes a hulkish transformation into a chaotic demon, the consequences of which can be quite dire. But I forgive her. I understand her biologically hardwired predilection.
When Tony Huge commented on the situation, he seemingly supported Connor, at least insofar as he strongly suggested that all of it was staged and somehow an act. Based on the involvement of Thailand's law enforcement, which, by the way, has the death penalty, I strongly doubt that they were all playing along and being puppeted by Connor's mastermind plans. Somehow, Connor didn't get locked up for a long time as a consequence, but ever since this incident, he hasn't made any major uploads to his channel, only occasionally uploading a YouTube short. Although he did regain his physique, the same cannot be said for his sanity. I assume he is still making some money though, through all of the affiliate links packed into every one of his videos' descriptions, and all of the supplements that he's promoting on his Instagram account. His latest scheme, which appears to be operating in tandem with Tony Huge's online presence, is promoting what he calls the Natty Plus protocol. Based on what Connor says, his intention is to essentially abolish the concept of a bodybuilder being natural or not being natural, suggesting that even common supplements like creatine are also unnatural. This, most likely, is just one gigantic, overextended cope about his continued use of steroids. However profitable this thing may be, I honestly have no idea if it makes him enough money to maintain his lifestyle, even if he stays in Thailand, which is significantly cheaper than living in the US. This is an angle that hasn't been mentioned by anyone I've seen, but given how lavish his life was in the United States, and given how little success his channel had, it's quite possible that his permanent move to Thailand had something to do with that. Then again, that still doesn't answer the question of how he's making any money to sustain himself and his physique in Thailand. But honestly, I'm not even sure I want to know. Despite now mostly focusing on fitness-related content, he's still a shadow of his former self. And even worse, he has no one to blame for this but himself. Not his parents, not his bullies from school, and not even ayahuasca. Every step of the way, Connor Murphy chose to satisfy himself. He chased a physique for vanity because he wanted to be seen as someone that he wasn't. He chased spirituality for pride because he wanted the world to acknowledge how enlightened he was. He chased clout to the point of making grave accusations about innocent people because the prospect of no longer getting attention terrified him. All of this happened because in his effort to deceive others about who he was, he also deceived himself. It's likely that he is, indeed, convinced that he's an enlightened messiah figure and that the people who cover his pathetic fall from grace are like the people who hated Jesus. However, I don't remember the part in the Bible where Jesus exiled himself to Thailand and spent the rest of his days injecting himself with backwater steroids and banging ladyboys on camera. And that is the story of Connor Murphy. Not a god, just a guy. I've been Turkey Tom. Thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.